It was the kind of knock that slices straight through sleep and carves its own space in your memory forever, sharp, urgent, trembling. I jolted awake in the stillness of my small apartment, heart pounding as if it already knew something my mind hadn't caught up with yet. When I checked the time glowing on my cracked phone screen, it read 1:03 a.m. I pulled myself from bed, feet cold on the wooden floor, and walked toward the door with a strange heaviness in my chest. When I opened it, the dim hallway light poured over a face I hadn't seen up close in months. Aria Llewellyn, my best friend Kellen's younger sister. Her eyes were wide, swollen and shining with fear. She pressed a finger to her lips, leaned in, and whispered with a voice so small it barely touched the air, "Don't say a word. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of helping someone when they need it most, please. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to Touch of Kindness. Your support helps us spread more stories that warm the heart and restore faith in people." Aria wasn't someone who showed up anywhere unannounced. She was gentle, artistic, intentional. Her world was paintbrushes, music, and sunlight pouring through windows. But standing there in the hallway, her hair messy from the wind, and her hands trembling as if she'd been holding something heavy for a long, long time, she didn't look like the girl who loved color. She looked like someone who had run out of places to go. She slipped inside quickly, closing the door as silently as she could. My apartment was small, cluttered with work papers and unopened bills, but it suddenly became the safest place she had. She sank down onto the couch, burying her face in her hands, trying to steady her breathing. The shadows in the room seemed to hold their breath with me. I didn't push her for an explanation. I just handed her the soft throw blanket that always lived on the back of the couch and warmed a glass of milk in the kitchen. Something my mother used to do to calm my nerves when I was little. As the milk heated, I glanced at her from the doorway. Her shoulders were shaking, barely noticeable but unmistakable. Something had broken in her world tonight. When she finally lifted her head and met my eyes, she looked like someone who had been standing alone in the cold for far too long. And when she finally spoke, her voice cracked through the silence like fragile glass. "I just didn't know where else to go." The morning sun filtered into the apartment hours later, casting soft golden light across the floor. The warmth made everything feel a little less frightening, but the heaviness in the air still clung to us. I'd fallen asleep in the armchair, keeping watch in case she needed anything. She looked peaceful now, curled beneath the blanket. It was the first time I'd seen her rest in what must have been days. When she woke, she apologized immediately, sitting upright with embarrassment flushing her cheeks. But I shook my head before she could get further. I told her no apology was needed. People didn't knock on doors at 1 a.m. for small reasons. Slowly, in long breaths and hesitant sentences, she told me the truth. Her older brother, my closest friend, had been spiraling for months, losing his job, drinking more, snapping over little things. And lately, he'd been taking that storm out on the people closest to him, on her. "It's not like he hits me or anything," she said quickly, as if she felt she needed to defend him, which only made my stomach twist more. "He just yells, breaks things, slams doors. I've been walking on eggshells for so long. Tonight he threw a chair, not at me. But it felt like the room wasn't safe anymore." I listened in painful silence, feeling the weight of betrayal press into my ribs. Kellen and I had grown up together. He was the guy who shared lunches with me when I forgot mine, who covered for me when I was late to class. I had no idea he'd become someone capable of terrifying the person he loved most. But pain changes people, loss warps them. And sometimes the people drowning the fastest are the ones pretending the water isn't even there. I made us breakfast, simple eggs and toast, but she barely touched it. Instead, she stared out the window, watching the city slowly wake up. I could see the question forming in her mind even before she spoke it. What do I do now? I wasn't a fixer. My life wasn't some heroic story. I was a graphic designer living paycheck to paycheck, just trying to stay afloat. But there was something about the vulnerability in her voice that made me sit up straighter and decide that today I would be more than just someone who survived quietly. I would try to be someone who helped. We spent the morning talking about possibilities, staying with her aunt for a while, calling a counselor, speaking to Kellen gently when he was in a stable mood. She hadn't told anyone else what she was going through, not even her friends. She was afraid of making her brother look like a monster, afraid of being judged for staying, afraid of being pitied for leaving. People often forget that emotional hurt can trap you in invisible cages, so instead of forcing decisions, I told her something I wished someone had told me when I went through my own dark chapter years ago. You don't have to decide everything today. You just need one safe day, and we can start with that. Her eyes filled with tears, not dramatic ones, but quiet, grateful ones, the kind that slip down cheeks silently because the body finally realizes it isn't alone. So we made a safe day. We went for a walk in the late morning sun, letting the fresh air fill our lungs. We stopped by a small bakery and got warm almond pastries. She smiled, really smiled, for the first time since she'd arrived. We talked about her art, her dreams, the mural she wanted to paint someday. She showed me old photos on her phone of her high school exhibitions. I'd seen her work before, but hearing her talk about it with renewed hope felt like watching something bloom in real time. But healing isn't a straight line. When her phone buzzed with a message from Kellen, just a simple "Where are you?" her hands trembled again. Her chest tightened. Questions flooded her mind. Should she go home? Should she explain herself? Should she stay? Should she run? She looked at me with confusion and guilt tangled in her expression, and I told her the truth gently. You are not responsible for someone else's storms, and you're allowed to step out of the rain to breathe. The afternoon drifted into soft golden hues as the sun lowered. I offered her my spare room for a few days so she could figure out her next steps without pressure. She hesitated but then nodded. Safety mattered more than pride. To distract her mind, we reorganized the small spare room, folded clothes, set up the little lamp, placed one of her sketchbooks on the nightstand so she'd remember her art still belonged to her, even now. The apartment felt warmer with her presence, lighter. But the evening brought another twist. Kellen showed up. I heard the footsteps first, then the familiar knock, heavy, impatient. Aria froze beside me, her face draining of color. I opened the door before he could pound again, stepping halfway through the frame. He looked exhausted, red-eyed, desperate. He asked if his sister was here, voice cracking with fear rather than anger. He said he had woken up sober that morning and realized everything he'd done, every harsh word, every shattered object, every moment she must have felt unsafe. He wasn't here to drag her home, he was here to break down, right there in the hallway. I messed up, man, he whispered, choking on the admission. I didn't know how bad I'd gotten until I saw her room empty this morning. For the first time in years, I saw not the grown man burdened by life, but the 17-year-old kid I grew up with, confused, scared, trying to be strong and failing. I didn't let him inside, but I let Aria step out beside me. Their eyes met, and everything inside them seemed to overflow at once. The hurt, the fear, the love, the history. And right there in the dim corridor, something quietly broke, so something healthier could begin. Aria didn't throw herself into his arms. She didn't forgive everything instantly. She just listened as he apologized fully, without excuses, without minimizing the harm. He told her he'd signed up for counseling that morning, told her he was going to quit drinking, told her he wanted to be her brother again, not the storm cloud that had been hovering over her life. Aria cried quietly. He cried too. It was messy, painful, imperfect, but it was real. I didn't push her to make any choice. She decided on her own to stay with me for a few more days. She needed space, and he respected that. And that small moment of respect was the first step toward rebuilding something that had cracked deeply. Over the next week, Aria slowly returned to herself. She painted again, small flowers, sweeping skies, and soft golden landscapes. My little apartment transformed into a temporary sanctuary, walls filling with the laughter we didn't know we needed. And through it all, she kept saying the same thing. I didn't know someone would actually care enough to help. But the truth was simpler. Sometimes all a person needs is one open door at 1 a.m., one safe place to collapse, one person who doesn't ask too many questions, doesn't judge, doesn't push, just someone who lets them breathe. As the story draws close to its ending, I want to gently ask, if this story touched your heart even a little, please support the channel by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing.